Hi, kids. Today we're going to talk about the vocabulary and grammar to describe a picture, which is a review of what you will be doing for your speaking exam for Chapter 2. In class first, we did this picture this warm-up, and to do the picture this warm-up, we first started off by making a list of vocabulary words that were present for the Chapter 1 picture. Words like acampar, pasear through here, caminar con el perro from Spanish 2 could be used. Lots of pictures, lots of words from the book located on page 45. Then I talked about the various grammar structures that could be used to describe this same picture. On page 14, you have the preterite and the imperfect. So basically you would be setting up a story for what's going on in the picture. Like el verano pasado, fui con mi familia al lago. Last summer, I went with my family to the lake. Then ser versus a star. We talked about how we could use ser versus a star to describe the picture. Subjunctive for hopes and wishes. Pronouns, comparisons, and demonstrative adjectives, and then negative words and time constructions. So we tried to write sentences with all of these to try and explain what happened in the Chapter 1 picture. Then we discussed what are you being asked to do, looking specifically at the dimensions in the area 4, how you can score perfect in the speaking exam that we're going to have. First of all, we talked about intonation. Actively initiate speech without prompting. This means that your teacher's not kind of dragging the information out of you. Speak spontaneously and clearly and evenly. So in other words, speaking without having pauses and without the teacher prodding you on. Message. Almost always responds appropriately to the prompt and or responds to questions and statements. So when you're responding to the prompt, did you include everything that was in here, or were you making up stuff that didn't happen? And did the teacher have to come back and ask you a lot of questions in order to get the whole meaning from the picture? Then, fluency. Were you mostly fluent? Did you say things without pausing? Intonation. When you speak in English, we know that when we're asking a question, we make our voice go up at the end. So were you like, la chica corre? That's a question. Fluency and pronunciation. Did we pronounce the words correctly? And contributing to the message. Did everything contribute to what you were trying to say? Next is vocabulary. Did you use vocabulary that was from that particular chapter? Did you use idiomatic expressions? Well, if you are using the grammar from that particular chapter, chances are you're using an idiomatic expression. Anything with the subjunctive has idiomatic expressions tied to it. To talk about someone's age, tener number años, that is an idiomatic expression. So, do they appropriately respond to the prompt? Of course they do, if you're using the right grammar. Now, down here at grammar, makes few errors on level grammatical structures. If you're using all Spanish 1 level stuff, that's going to be down here because you're below level. But if you're using things from Spanish 3, those are higher level grammatical structures. And are you using them correctly? That comes with practice. Then I took you into the Chapter 2 picture prompt. In order to do the Chapter 2 picture prompt, we talked about how to think. First of all, you have to think in one of two ways. You can either tell a story about the picture or describe what is happening in the picture. And then that, of course, depends on the grammar of the chapter. If it's asking you in the chapter to use the preterite and the imperfect, you're going to need to tell a story. If you're just telling what's going on in the picture, then you might just be using the subjunctive or something. So, step 1, if this is our picture, then you start by setting the scene. Where are you? Well, in this particular scene, we're in the mountains near a lake, it looks like. And what's the weather like? It looks like it's nice weather. This one kid over here is wearing long sleeves, but for the most part, everybody's wearing short sleeves. So it might be a little bit cool, but you don't know. And what are the elements that are around you? Well, we have rocks, we have a road, we have a lake, we have some trees, we have a waterfall, we have mountains with some snow on them. But what do we know how to say? So we're going to limit it to what we know. Then in step 2, you need to think about what you learned in the chapter. What vocabulary is useful to you? Well, in this chapter we had escalar, to climb. We had hacer senderismo. We had ciclismo. We had atletismo. We had remo. El equipo de remo is a rowing team. But back in Spanish 2, you're supposed to learn estirarse, which means to stretch. You had nadar back in Spanish 1. You had andar en bicicleta in Spanish 1. So although you can use these words, you want to make sure you're using things that are appropriate for level. Is there a certain grammar topic that can be used in this picture? Well, if we think about it, I was going to run, but I had to stretch. That is appropriate for chapter 2. He was stubborn, but he decided to climb. Decided is preterite, so that could stick with this chapter. Last summer, I used to row every day, so that's an imperfect sentence you could use. Let's go swimming, this guy could say. So, of course, that could be a nosotros command. And how can you show off what you know about the picture and still show your grammar of knowledge? The thing is that you want to be able to express everything that's happening in the picture and still use that advanced grammar. And how do you do that? You have to plan ahead. So, we start off by taking notes. What are some things that you must say? Well, I know I need to include a nosotros command. I know I need to include a subjunctive sentence somewhere in there. I know I need to include the imperfect. Are you meeting the needs of the speaking rubric? When you look at the speaking rubric, which I just went through, it should be fairly easy to determine whether or not you're on level by if you're going through your textbook and saying that's what's there. And did you make a basic outline? I'll show you how to do that next. Oh, and of course you need to practice. Not only did you sit down and try to describe the picture, you probably needed to practice it a couple of times before you actually did it. Were you just able to describe everything that was happening? Well, if you took appropriate notes on the picture, you won't leave this little guy out here by himself, not doing anything. And did you have someone listen who checked off all the items in the outline? That's the best way to practice. Okay, so the notes. What can you bring into the description when you sit down for your test day? Well, of course, I don't want you to bring in the full word for word what you're going to say, because that's not fair. But these were my notes based on this picture. I knew that I needed to include some preterite and imperfect. I knew I needed the word hacer senderismo, this guy up here. I knew I needed atletismo for this guy. I knew iba a something, pero something. I was going to, but something happened. So I'm just going to say this guy. I was going to run, but I hurt my leg maybe. I know I need ciclismo for this guy. I know I needed a nosotros command. Let's go do something. So I'm going to do vamos a over here, because that's an affirmative nosotros command. Equipo de remo is a rowing team, so I've got them handled. An object pronoun. Well, I was like, what can I use for didn't support her? Her, la, that's an object pronoun, so no la apoya, didn't support her. I made this guy a girl. And then busca alguien que, because I knew I needed a subjunctive sentence. Looking for someone that. She's probably looking for someone that will swim with her. And then terco, stubborn. This guy looks pretty stubborn because he's climbing a mountain all by himself. So I'm going to include that in my presentation. Now, how would I describe the picture? When I'm talking, what are those notes going to be translated into? So if I'm starting off with my setting, of course, and this big person in the corner, this is probably how I would start it. El verano pasado, Marta acampé con un grupo de su escuela en las montañas. Last summer, Marta camped with a group from her school in the mountains. Marta tenía 17 años. Hacía senderismo todos los días. Marta was 17 years old. She did some hiking with her friends. So I've taken care of this corner of my presentation. Hacía fresco, pero hacía sol. Había un lago cerca. It was cool, but it was sunny. There was a lake nearby. Now, section 2. I'm going to take the track guy and the stretchy guy right here. So I'd say, el novio de Marta, Juan, era parte del equipo de atletismo. Corría todos los días con Pablo. So I made this guy Marta's boyfriend, and I said Marta's boyfriend, Juan, was part of the track team. He ran every day with Pablo, who's going to be my guy over here stretching. And then I'd say, Pablo iba a correr, pero se lastimó su pierna. Pablo, this guy over here, where's my mouse? Pablo, this guy over here, was going to run, but he hurt his leg. Pablo tuvo que estirarse. Pablo had to stretch. Now here I'm using a preterite, an imperfect, a preterite, Iba a correr como perro. Corría is imperfect. Era is imperfect. So now let's talk about the biker guy. Antonio no le gusta correr, pero le gusta andar en bicicleta. Antonio didn't like to run, but he liked to ride a bike. Practicaba el ciclismo todos los días. He practiced cycling every day. Now let's talk about the lake people. We got two folks in the lake. We've got swimmer girl, I made her a girl, and we've got rowing team. Pepita le gusta nadar y dijo, vamos a nadar. Pepito likes to swim and said, let's go swimming. El equipo de remo no la apoya. The rowing team did not support her. There's your object pronoun. Pepita busca a alguien que quiere nadar. Pepita looks for somebody that wants to swim, but of course can't find anybody. Ellos practicaban mientras ella nadaba. They practiced while she was swimming. Well, I got some imperfect right there. And an idiomatic expression. Now let's talk about mountain guy. Arturo es terco y decidió escalar la montaña solo. Arturo is stubborn, and he decided to climb the mountain alone. So, let's see if I covered it all. This was my original list. What was in the chapter? Well, imperfect was in the chapter. So, imperfect, do I have any of that? Oh, preterite and imperfect right there, because I used a lot of it. Ir a infinitive. Ir a infinitive, oh, there you go. Nosotros commands. Vamos a, did that one. Object pronouns. No la apoya over here. Subjunctive with the unknown. Busca alguien que, and then the subjunctive. And then subjunctive with feelings. Oh, that one wasn't included. And vocabulary, of course, I had hacer senderismo, atletismo, ciclismo, equipo de remo, terco, escalar montaña. But you know what really bothers me is I didn't include subjunctive with feelings. Does it matter that we don't have that one thing in there? Of course, it does not matter if we're using grammar correctly. And it doesn't matter if we're using vocabulary correctly. And the grammar has us using those idiomatic expressions. We just have to make sure that we are speaking spontaneously. Up here, spontaneously and evenly with no pauses and fluently, and that comes with practice. So, even though we have our outline, we're going to make sure that we are practicing this repeatedly so that when we get to our speaking test, we'll be good to go. So, based on what you learned, we then wrote an outline of what we were going to say regarding the picture. I put this lesson on Edmodo, and then after the written test, you're going to have your speaking test. So I would suggest practicing frequently. And then, of course, we did a closure where you explain the procedure to somebody else on how to describe a picture prompt.